she had a system. It was not complicated, but it was deliberate, and she had been perfecting it for 3 years. Every morning, Claire Donovan pulled her hair into the flattest, most forgettable bun she could manage. She wore oversized blazers in colors, like exhausted beige and forgotten gray. She owned exactly 0 items of clothing that could be described as fitted. Her glasses, thick-framed, slightly too large for her face, were chosen specifically because they swallowed her features. No makeup beyond a little chapstick. No jewelry except a simple watch her father had given her before he passed. She was 31 years old, a senior research analyst at a mid-size financial consulting firm in Boston. And she was, by every measurable standard, invisible. That was the point. Most people who knew Claire from work assumed she was quiet, unremarkable, and probably a little boring. Her colleagues liked her well enough but never quite noticed her. Men glanced past her in coffee lines. At company events, she was the woman refilling her plate at the buffet while everyone else networked. She blended into rooms the way certain birds blend into tree bark, not by accident, but by long and careful practice. What almost no one knew. What? Claire kept with the same ferocity that other women kept secrets about debt or past. Relationships. Was that underneath the oversized blazers and the forgettable buns and the swallowing glasses? She was stunning, not in a vague, pleasant way. In a way that stopped conversations. Her sister had called her aggressively beautiful once as a joke, and Claire had not laughed, because it had felt more like a diagnosis than a compliment. She had learned early, too early, what beauty cost a woman who wasn't careful with it. The attention that felt like a spotlight and burned the same way. The men who decided they knew her before she had spoken a single word. The women who kept their distance before she had done a thing to deserve it. The way her ideas in meetings got attributed to other people, because it was easier to believe the pretty girl was decorative than to accept she was also the smartest person in the room. So she had hidden it, not out of shame, out of self-preservation. She wanted to be known, really known, before she was seen. She wanted whoever eventually loved her to love the inside first, because she had watched too many women be loved only for their surface, and she knew how that story ended. The blind date was her best friend Dana's idea, which meant it was, on some level, Claire's fault for being friends with Dana. His name is Ethan Mercer, Dana had said 3 weeks before, sitting across from Claire at their usual Friday lunch spot, sliding a folded piece of paper across the table like a spy. He's 34. He runs his own investment firm. He's been a client of my firm for 2 years, and I have personally vetted him, and he is, Claire, genuinely a good man. Dana. He reads. He volunteers. He has a dog. Dana, I don't... He lost his mom 2 years ago, and he still sends flowers to her favorite charity. Every year on her birthday. Dana folded her hands on the table. I am telling you this because I know that's the kind of detail that gets past your defenses. It had gotten past her defenses. She hated that it had. She agreed to one dinner. One. At a restaurant called Linden, which was the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list that required a map. She chose her outfit with the same careful anti-strategy she applied to everything. Wide-leg charcoal trousers, a shapeless cream blouse, her enormous glasses, her flattest bun. She arrived 7 minutes late on purpose, not rude, just late enough that he would already be seated, already committed, already unable to form a first impression based on her walking through the door. What she did not plan for was Ethan Mercer. He was standing when she arrived. Not because she was late. He had simply stood up the moment he saw her approaching. The way people do when they were raised with the specific kind of manners that are extinct in most men under 40. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of face that was interesting rather than classically handsome. A slight crook in his nose that suggested a story. Dark eyes that were alert and warm at the same time. He was wearing a simple navy suit, no tie, and he looked like someone who was completely comfortable in his own skin in a way that Claire found immediately irritatingly disarming. Claire, he said. That's me, she said, and shook his hand and sat down, and prepared to be underwhelmed. She was not underwhelmed. The dinner lasted 3 hours, not because the food was exceptional, though it was, not because the wine was good, though it was that too, but because Ethan Mercer talked to her the way almost no one talked to her, like what she said was the most interesting thing in the room. He asked follow-up questions, real ones, not the social lubricant questions people asked at first dates to fill silence, but the kind that meant he had actually listened to her previous answer and wanted to know more. He had opinions and stated them directly, and changed two of them during the course of the conversation, when she made a point he found compelling. And he said so without embarrassment. "You're right. I hadn't thought about it that way." And Claire, who had been on enough dates to know how rare that was, felt something shift quietly in her chest. He did not look at her the way men usually looked at women. He looked at her the way you look at someone whose next sentence you're genuinely waiting for. She drove home that night and sat in her parked car for 10 minutes before going inside. She was in trouble. They met again the following week. And the week after that, always dinners, always long, always the kind of conversation that made the restaurant around them recede until it was just the two of them at the table and every other sound was background noise. He told her about his mother, about how she had been a high school English teacher who marked up novels in pencil and left them for him to find, full of her thoughts, her arguments with the author, her favorite lines underlined twice. He told her that losing her had taught him that he had been spending his life optimizing for the wrong things. Claire told him about her father's watch, about the years she spent making herself invisible, about the way she had come to understand that being unseen was a choice she had made to protect something she couldn't name yet. He listened to that last part very carefully. "What are you protecting?" he asked. She looked at him across the table. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "Okay," he said. No pressure, no performance of understanding, just okay. By the 5th dinner, she knew she was falling. By the 6th, she was almost angry about it, because it was not supposed to happen this way, this fast, this completely. She had rules. She had a system, and Ethan Mercer was inside the system without her having noticed him enter. And now he was just there, in the center of it like he had always been. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that he was falling too, and that he had already seen past everything she thought she was hiding. It happened on their 7th evening together, not at a restaurant but at his apartment, where he had cooked dinner with the focused, slightly chaotic energy of someone who genuinely loved cooking but only did it for people he cared about. She was sitting on his kitchen counter, drinking wine and watching him argue with a pan of garlic butter and laughing with her whole face. The real laugh. The one she didn't manage in public. The one that took over completely and made her eyes close, and he turned around from the stove and looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. He set down the wooden spoon. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "You're burning the garlic," she said. "I don't care about the garlic." He turned off the burner. He crossed the kitchen and leaned against the counter beside her, close but not crowding, and looked at her with those direct dark eyes. "I need to tell you something, and I'm going to say it once, and then you can do whatever you want with it." Her heart was very loud. "I don't know why you hide," he said quietly. "I've watched you do it every dinner. You come in prepared to be overlooked, to take up less space than you deserve. And I haven't said anything because I figured you had your reasons, and they weren't mine to question." He paused. "But I want you to know that it didn't work." "Not on me." He held her gaze. "I'm not in love with who you're pretending to be, Claire. I'm in love with what you couldn't hide. The way your mind works, the way you fight for your opinions, and then actually listen when someone challenges them. The way you talk about your father's watch like it's still warm from his wrist. The way you just laughed." He shook his head slightly. "You can wear every oversized blazer. You own and pull your hair back until your arms are tired, and it won't matter, because what I fell for isn't something you can cover up." The kitchen was very quiet. Claire felt the back of her eyes burn. She blinked once, carefully. "You knew," she said. It was not a question. "From about the 3rd dinner," he said. "Dana is your best friend and she talks. And she told me you were going to try to disappear. I decided to just wait and see who showed up anyway." "And who showed up?" "You," he said simply. "All of you. Even the parts you were trying to keep off the table." She looked at him for a long moment. And then, slowly, she reached up and took off her glasses, set them on the counter beside her, pulled the pin from her bun and let her dark hair fall loose around her shoulders for the first time in front of another person in longer than she could remember. She sat there on his kitchen counter, no armor, no system, no carefully constructed invisibility. Just her, and she let him look. He looked at her the same way he always had. Like what she said was the most interesting thing in the room. Only now his eyes were a little brighter. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she said. "And this, right here, before the end of this story, is the moment to stop and say something directly to you. Because if you have watched this far, if you have stayed through every minute of Claire's story, then you already understand something that most people spend their whole lives circling without ever landing on. The thing we hide is never really hidden. The love we're most afraid to show is the love that leaks out anyway. Through the way we laugh, the way we listen, the way we talk about the people we've lost. You cannot hide what is most real about you. You can only delay the right person finding it. And if someone in your life sees you, really sees you, past the armor and the system and the careful distance, do not make them wait too long. This is your sign. Stay until the very last second of this video. And if these stories find something true in you, like this video and subscribe to this channel, because we are here every week telling the stories that remind you that being known is not the danger. Being known is the whole point. Back to Claire. She did not become a different person after that night in Ethan's kitchen. She still wore her blazer sometimes, still pulled her hair back when she needed the armor that professional invisibility provided. Old habits are not deleted by a single honest conversation. They are gradually, gently replaced by better ones. But she stopped hiding from Ethan. Fully, completely, irreversibly stopped. He met the version of her that argued passionately about economic policy at 10 o'clock at night. The version that cried at her father's favorite song when it came on the radio and didn't apologize for it. The version that was when she felt genuinely safe, luminous, not just in the physical way that had always frightened her, but in the way that certain people are luminous when they are entirely, unapologetically themselves. He loved every version equally. That was the thing she had never had before. Not love that arrived for one part of her and tolerated the rest. Love that had cataloged her completely and chosen all of it. On a Sunday morning 6 months later, sitting in his apartment with coffee and the newspaper and his dog, Edison at her feet, and her hair loose and her glasses on the nightstand, and absolutely nothing between her and being seen, Claire Donovan looked at Ethan Mercer across the breakfast table and understood. Finally, what she had been protecting all those years. She had been protecting the capacity to feel exactly this. The safety of being chosen not for what she looked like, not for what she performed, but for the irreducible, uneditable, impossible to hide truth of who she actually was. It had been worth protecting. It had been worth waiting for. And it had been, in the end, impossible to hide from the right person. That is always how it works. The right person doesn't fall in love with your surface, or your armor, or the careful story you construct for the world. They fall in love with the crack in the armor. The laugh that escapes before you can stop it. The tear you almost manage to hold back. The opinion you can't keep quiet even when you're trying to be invisible. They fall in love with what you couldn't hide. And that is the only kind of love worth building a life on.